Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Welcome. Welcome. It is Wednesday, May 14th, and we're back in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs, and we welcome our Lieutenant Governor yet again on a bill that relates to one of his favorite subjects. So we're going to begin with
economic development.
Economic development,
Exactly.
exactly. The health of Vermont businesses.
There you go.
Thank you very much,
You're
Chairwoman.
very welcome. So just to set objectives, we're going to finish up testimony after John. We're going to finish up testimony with Graham and Jeffrey, and then hear from indoor outdoor growers. Most of the fee discussion will be in finance because that's their jurisdiction. But we will hear from Sarah and Aaron and Adam, and then we will shift to Pepper and Gabe, hopefully ending by 10:45. So we'll be, and Josh, you're on there. And then we will look at the amendments and begin our committee discussion on where we want to land it. And we will hopefully either land it today or tomorrow. So the objective is to get it out tomorrow. So, John, welcome.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor John Rogers. Going to recover some ground when James and I tried to figure out a more equitable fee schedule that I know
James Pepper.
James Pepper.
Okay, I was
Sorry,
thinking of yours.
Chair Pepper. So what we were trying to do is make it more equitable based on the amount of income potential for each business. What I heard from some of the tier 2 indoor growers is they would appreciate the same consideration as the tier 1 growers, which is a level license fee, and those are Vermonters. And as I discussed before, the bigger tiers are big corporations or people with lots of investors because it's extremely expensive. I don't know what this does to our bottom line, Chair Pepper. I'm sure it changes it a little, but my suggestion would be if we need to backfill, that we use a little bit more of the excise tax. My whole hope in this is trying to keep the small craft growers in business. And I'll tell you from my conversations with a huge number of folks in the industry, they are very frustrated that the pace of making this business work has been far too slow. And we are going to lose a lot of good businesses we already have, and we're going to continue to lose them until we figure out a direct to consumer. And so I talked with Chair Pepper about including in his pilot program the ability for 2 manufacturers and 2 cultivators to be able to run special events as well, so that when they come back next year, we have all the information we need on their pilot so that we can get to direct to consumer. And I think the CCB needs to be charged in the language with coming back to the legislature with a proposal how to implement direct to consumer for next year. That would be my hope.
John, what would you consider yourself? Are you a small craft grower?
Yes, even though, and so that's another thing that I think a lot of people misunderstand. So if you look at my fee proposal, if you look at tier 5 outdoor, I've talked to a whole bunch of people about how much people can grow and make. A tier 5 outdoor has a similar production potential as a tier 2 indoor. So if you look at the fee structure, a tier 2 indoor today pays $37.50. A tier 5 outdoor pays $18,000. The outdoor fees were $18,000.
Tier 2. I see.
Tier 5 outdoor.
A tier 2 indoor
Right,
can
I see
produce
that's at 37.
37 and then go up to the tier 5
Oh, sorry, I
outdoor
thought you
at
were comparing it to
18,000.
tier two.
They can produce about the same amount of cannabis, but the indoor cannabis is worth more money. And so this has been out of whack since it was instituted. And our attempt was to bring it more into line with income potential and more fairness. And I think incentives should be given to people who grow outdoors and aren't using electricity, which has an impact on the environment. I mean, and we should, as Vermonters, if we care about our environment, we should be recognizing that.
And you're primarily an outdoor grower.
I'm at, okay, so my license is a tier 4 mixed, so I can grow 1,250 plants outdoors, and I have 1,000 square feet indoors, which I have been paying for my license, but I don't utilize because I've not made enough money to set it up. It's like $100,000 investment, even though I already own the building where I'm gonna put it. So it's a huge investment, and the cannabis business and most businesses that I've talked to are not making, I'm not talking to anybody that's making a lot of money. There's a lot of people holding on.
Right, so you reworked this proposal, because we have the proposal before, we have the JFO work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, which makes it looking like it's roughly breaking even, the fee schedule. So
Yes.
what have you and Pepper discussed adjusting?
Well, it's right on, it's on that fee schedule, and I think if finance is gonna do most of the lifting on that, we don't need to spend a lot of time. But what I want the committee to understand, I don't think many legislators understand what each of these tiers can produce. And so I'm a tier 4, you'll hear from Sam in a little while, he's a tier 5 outdoor grower. That's the biggest outdoor, but he produces about the same amount as a tier 2 indoor. And that's what I'm trying to point out here, that your tier 3, 4, and 5 indoors are massive operations putting out a huge amount of cannabis. And this is part of the problem in the industry, is that they can undersell the small craft growers. And the retailers are completely controlling the market. So small craft growers don't necessarily have an outlet for their product. And this is what's going to drive a lot of our best small growers out of business unless we can figure out the direct to consumer in the next couple of years.
Keisha.
Can I ask a question of the room, maybe Pepper, maybe the Lieutenant Governor? Is there a state, or even if we compare to spirits, is there a better way to assess a fee than simply on square footage?
New output.
Like
Yeah, I would say
gross
it's more
receipts.
based on output and income potential is what it should be. And that's what we tried to get closer to here.
So you guys have already made, James Pepper, Chair of the
Yeah.
Board. The legislature's already made the decision that you're gonna try and influence behavior in this market based upon these fees. Because you made the decision not to make them so high that they would cover our expenses.
Sure.
So now you can incentivize them however you want to encourage whatever outcomes you want.
Well, I guess is there a fairer way than square footage? Because that strikes me as a bit an economic development and a finance question.
But it's also not square footage, indoors square footage, outdoors plant count.
Okay.
And so it's not apples and apples. That's it. These charts are all over the place. And so that's why I think your growth potential or your income potential needs to be the biggest part of the equation.
So I'm new to, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
So I'm
no,
new to
tell
this
us.
conversation, learning a lot about pot these days. But I think to Senator Ram Hinsdale's question is, have we contemplated in previous conversations like a per bushel excise tax? So it's more on
Per
volume
pound,
of output rather than on square footage or plants?
I mean,
Tom knows apples.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
What do you call it?
Grew up on
And then again, it's very tough. So back to the indoor, higher potential because they grow bigger, fatter buds, they have more control over it. Outdoor stuff, we're up against the elements. So like my personal business, a huge amount of my stuff goes for biomass, which is worth $100 a pound. Your indoor nice buds, in the store are going for $4,000 a pound. So there's a big difference. So you can't say all plants are created equal either. So we go through our crop, we take the nicest buds off the plants. Those get saved for the pre-rolls and that stuff. The rest of it goes into biomass, and it's like if you're working in the logging industry, you got your veneer logs and you got your pulp, right? But you have to have a market for all of it. Outdoor has more pulp, indoor has more veneer logs.
And outdoor with biomass, you get how much,
It's worth about $100 a pound right now.
and how much do you get for the best flour? I mean,
Well, there's a lot of stores now because of consumer demand, wrongly so, that are not even interested in outdoor.
Wrongly so, which part?
Wrongly so, because
Wrongly so,
they can
not
grow-
interested?
because it doesn't, what the bud looks like before you grind it up and put it into a joint does not affect the flavor or quality
Oh,
of the
But
joint.
you're
And I
saying
think
it's wrong that they're not
there's a
interested.
lot of folks, I think one down in Middlebury doesn't even buy any outdoor weed, but there's
Oh,
a
I see.
lot of folks that in the retail business that are carrying more indoor, less outdoor, so it makes it harder for the outdoor people to have a market.
so is it fair to say that the indoor market produces a more stable
More
product?
valuable,
More of it,
yep.
and that, because it's more stable and more consistent, it's more valuable?
Well, you have more control over it, which means you can grow bigger, heavier, tighter buds, which look better. And people, just like when you're shopping for apples, you're gonna look for the nice looking apple. People judge them more on looks than on taste. But once it's ground up and put into a joint or made into rosin, the outdoor is every bit as good, and some people would say it's better because it's grown naturally.
Okay,
Well, is
All
there
right.
a parallel between the production of this product and the production of other products that are taxed and treated as intoxicants of various kinds, such as alcohol? There are different kinds of alcohol that taste very differently. Some are premium, some are not, but the tax on it is
the
completely
same.
the same way.
Is a gallon. Well, tax versus fee.
Yeah,
And so I am still curious
Right.
how we do like a,
so I'm gonna try and keep us in our lane, because two of us are gonna have this in-depth discussion in finance.
oh, I can't wait.
So, I know.
We're looking forward to it.
Like, so, because we're gonna include this in our bill, but we're basically just passing it on to finance for this
Excellent.
further cut.
Should I move on then?
I would encourage you to
Okay.
move on.
So
So
I'm
I
just gonna,
just wanna clarify, has this proposal, you two have talked about this proposal, and because I think we just wanna figure out which, and has JFO done any work on this?
JFO did a fiscal analysis
I know,
on the old one.
yeah.
I just ran some numbers here because I have a chart, so it's not JFO's work, but to leave the tier twos at the same level would be a deficit of less than $100,000. Maybe about 70,000.
70?
70,000, right
Okay.
around there, given our kind of current license fees.
Okay, so we go from something that's revenue neutral roughly to the plus of 50,000 to a deficit of 70. Okay.
I just want to make sure I know who our main witness is on understanding these numbers, because there is an
JFO.
economic,
Well, probably.
not in that regard, but there is an economic component to what we're either incentivizing or not incentivizing.
We're hearing from indoor and outdoor cultivators right after we hear from John and Graham and Jeffrey.
Okay, is Pepper gonna talk, like, mixed at 10,000 versus outdoor at 9,000 versus indoor at 72,000? Like, are we gonna talk about this from a business?
I mean, I would be happy to, and I think James can weigh in. We're two of the guys that have the expertise that can talk about this. But if we're gonna move on to all subjects, because finance is gonna work on this, I think we need to move on.
Can I just ask, why would mixed be much closer to outdoor than to?
Because mixed is outdoor, and that's
Mixed is outdoor.
That's one of the
and-
things that I'm,
Okay.
okay, so that's one of the things that I'm struggling with, is that very few legislators get that this is apples, oranges, and pears. So mixed is only 1,000 square feet of indoor.
Okay,
So it's a small, so if you go back up to 1,000 square feet of indoor, it's $750. No, it's $1,500, sorry, wrong chart. And so you add that on top of the outdoor fee.
Okay, so you get a little discount for big.
Yeah, because you're a very small indoor,
Yeah,
but you
okay.
grow a lot outdoors.
I think that's important for us to
And
understand from a,
Well, and I think it's
Policy.
really, I think you're right,
Yeah.
I think it's really important for legislators to understand what each of these tiers mean.
Yeah.
What the growth potential, income potential all are, and what the cost drivers for all of these categories are.
yes.
And we could spend a whole hour on that, I think, but we don't have that time today.
And sadly, we're at the end of session. We're
Yes,
closed down.
and-
And I want to get this bill to finance.
And what our hope is, in the cannabis community, is that during the off session, that the CCB and cannabis license holders will work together so that we can hopefully make more progress next year.
Yeah.
And I take it there's no tier 6 people, that's why it's easy to
I
strike.
don't think we have tier 6.
No, we never opened it,
They never
Okay.
opened it.
and we never should have opened some of the others, but that's too late. Okay, I'm gonna mention a couple things just real quickly. They're not in the bill, but just to put them on your radar for next year. The $50 registration, and this is for the board as well. I understand there's a move to go to be able to register stuff for 2 years, but it's still gonna cost $50 a year. Generally, a fee covers the cost of implementing it.
Right.
So the cost of implementing it
Or
for
running
two-
the program.
for running the program for 2 years shouldn't be any more than 1 year. But here's the big catch. If you have one of these giant operations that's vertically integrated and they pay a $50 registration fee and make 1 million units, and then you've got Ben Wilcox, the little tier 1, who registers his pre-rolls and has 400 units, they pay the same price. And it's a question, I don't have the answer, but is that fair? Is that what we want to do? That Walmart gets the same license fee as the little mom and pop store
That's
on
like
the
a
side of the
classic
street?
finance question.
Yes.
Okay.
That is a
That's a
good
true
question.
finance.
One thing that we didn't address in this bill and needs to be addressed is a way for people to get a medical card whose doctor won't give them a medical card. Veterans can't get medical cards. We need to deal with that. It's been proven that cannabis helps people with PTSD. There are a ton of veterans that want it and they can't currently get medical cards from the VA.
I've actually heard it's not that hard to get them.
Without going too far off on the tangent, I have asked Senator Lyons to hear actually from some of the folks around the room who have been really strong advocates on strengthening and partitioning
So-
better medical marijuana, and she agrees.
I think on a number of these issues, we need judiciary and health and welfare will need to weigh in on consumption, on a bunch of things. So I think that teeing stuff up for next year is what makes most sense,
Okay.
and dealing with what we have in front of us currently in amendments makes sense for this year, given we have 2 days.
And I haven't looked at the latest version, I still feel very strongly that if we're going to have a moratorium on new retail licenses, there should also be a moratorium on cultivators. There's already too much stuff in the market. It's what's driving the price to the bottom, and that nobody should be able to sell their license. So if we have a moratorium, in essence, it drives the value of your license up. If anybody gives up their license and wants to sell their store or their manufacturing center or their cultivation operation, that license needs to go back to the board, and they have to be fully vetted by the board, just as a new application would be. It's extremely important.
Okay, so we'll hear from Pepper and Gabe on that. Is that,
I am disappointed that we're not gonna do anything about consumption and the fact that this, affects marginalized communities more than anyone. People who live in apartments have no place that they can legally smoke today. And so consumption is a huge issue. You can go to the store, you can legally buy it, and then you have no place to smoke, leaving people violating the law to be able to smoke something they are legally allowed to possess.
okay, but in fact, how many citations have actually been issued?
Is
I-
that, so
But that's a
should we?
judiciary question.
Right, no,
It's a
should,
judiciary
so,
question,
so we
but it is-
legalized weed because so many people we knew were using it, and rightly so, it should have never been made illegal. And I know we're not gonna get to it this year, it's extremely important that we get to it.
Yes, I think at some point we need to deal with it. The one state that is close to us that has open consumption is a state, I think, that in many
Well-
ways regrets that they did it the way they did it.
Well, we just, made cocktails to go permanent,
Yes.
and we can't smoke a
Yes.
joint out in the park or in the edge of a field. And I think it's ridiculous, but that's that.
Legally.
I would, I mean, I'm just curious if you have taken that question to judiciary, because I talked to members of judiciary who were very open and sympathetic to having this discussion. You know, how, if it's paced in some way is completely a judiciary
So
question.
I
Like if
think-
it's allowed in at-home consumption, where you're allowed to smoke on your own premises, in a rental, et cetera, they really want to take that as I understand
Okay.
it.
So that is a
That's just
question
not our
definitely
question.
for next year.
Excellent. Well, and I am going to step aside so that everybody else has time. And
John, thank you.
I thank the committee for your work on this and look forward to continuing.
Finance.
I don't believe you mentioned the event licenses. Did you want to say anything?
Oh, yeah, I think Pepper will get to them. So yeah, the event licenses, I will mention quickly. The board's proposal was to have 5 special events run by retailers. I and others in this room think it's super important that we have a couple manufacturers and a couple cultivators also be allowed to run these events so that when we come back next year, we have some historic basis to formulate direct to consumer. If we just do it with manufacturers, there's gonna be a space there. Well, can if we just do it for retailers, we're gonna have a space there and go, oh, can manufacturers do it? Can
Right.
agree.
cultivators do
We
it?
will have that conversation.
Can I
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Do you support the retail moratorium? I don't know that we've fully landed as a committee.
Okay, I think the board needs to have the authority. First off, we should go to an opt-out instead of an opt-in, and maybe some of the businesses in Burlington would move to Williston or somewhere else. I think that would be a huge step forward, and I think the board should be able to
You mean for
look.
towns? So just to bring the new members in, for
Yeah,
towns, all
yes,
towns had to
for
opt
towns.
in rather
Yes.
than opt out.
And I think the board should have the authority to say where they think retailers need to be, where there are places where there's no retailers close by. There's other places where there's way too many retailers. If that happens, then yeah, I'm fully supportive of keeping licenses going, but I do, yeah,
I think,
Thanks, sir.
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, John.
thank you.
Graham and Jeffrey, let us finally finish your testimony. We apologize for having had your time interrupted.
Thanks,
And I think
Senators.
this is what we have already.
There, you got it again.
We have something new.
No, it's new.
And Heidi, I've got the Zoom link
Okay.
request up.
Feel like-
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
For the record, Jeffrey Pizzatello, Vermont Growers Association. Some brief, just follow up on what we just heard. Appreciate the discussion. Thanks again for everyone's time.
Yeah.
It was asked what other states do, to get at fees or just understanding of different tiers of production. What other states do, and not everybody, but just for consideration. Energy consumption per square foot, wattage per square foot. Also seasonality dynamics between different cultivation categories. It's referred to as a cultivation ratio that addresses seasonality, frequency of harvest. So you'll often see like a 1-to-4. So for every 1,000 square feet indoor, that's not the same as 1,000 square feet outside. It typically correlates to about 4,000 square feet outside. So those are some parameters that other general assemblies have looked at to address this issue beyond fees alone for production
I mean,
management.
fees, indoor, outdoor.
Correct. All right. Share my screen.
So let's pick up where we left off with your.
Yeah,
So I'm Graham Unix, Rupanoff Policy Director, Rural Vermont, member of the Vermont Cannabis Equity Coalition, and I think what we did do is, again, try to recenter ourselves, and support coming to the committee with some more common ground by taking the CCD's proposal around direct sales, editing it, and coming to you with that. But we wanted to start again, just sort of at the top of our suggested amendments that we got you on April 16th, and we got others before that. I'm gonna try hard time pulling it up, but the first language in that is the equity funding, and you've all heard that from the LEOB. You've heard that not from the CCB, but if you read the report, it was in there. You've heard that from us and our member organizations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is the budget, anything that's being asked for the budget like this $1 million is a foregone.
It's done, the budget's signed off on.
So I'm just gonna pass through that our first priorities here, that you can see the equity funding. But I will say that, from our perspective, what this has done, you've now defunded the only social equity program that the money from this industry is going towards. In that sense, I'd like to skip over towards public consumption, because I think that's the next place that social equity is so.
And if I can, just for a second, what defunding the Cannabis Business Development Fund means is things are, you've been hearing, I think, over the past couple of weeks that things are very challenging right now for small producers, especially. But those aren't the only ones who are social equity applicants. We've got retailers, wholesalers as well. Every dollar counts. They were getting a $5,000 annual beneficiary payment from ACCD from that fund. Without that can be make or break for some businesses. I just want to put that on the table for everybody.
Yeah.
It's important to highlight that.
So I think I know
Thanks.
Senator Rogers just brought up, or not Senator, former Senator, now Lieutenant Governor Rogers, just brought up public consumption, and you all had some responses. But I did want to respond to something that you all said about citations in Vermont since then. And I don't personally know the numbers. I don't know if we have the data tracking, but what we have heard from our colleagues in Massachusetts is that post-legalization in Massachusetts, disproportionate enforcement of policing continued just on the consumption side. And that's what we're seeing here in Vermont, but I would say that beyond what we know about implicit bias and disproportionate policing, we've also created a system now which further makes it disproportionate, because we've said that the people who are already not receiving that implicit bias are the communities who already have access to housing, ownership, land ownership. So those other communities that are already marginalized are double, triple, whatever it is, marginalized again. And on top of that, we have the new executive order on policing. So I'm just, from our perspective,
Which
which is
the federal?
the federal
Oh,
executive order on policing, which is about local law enforcement, further militarizing, further police powers.
Right, and as
we
you know,
we know other executive issues on DEI, et cetera. So what we're just pointing to is a constellation, which with our public consumption laws, makes this all the more concerning for those populations. I can leave it there, but I think it's pretty dangerous.
yes, and I would say federally, we'd agree, although we're, as you know, pushing back as fully as we can.
Do you have language on this one?
We do. It's right there on.
It's right here under recommended language.
It's pretty simple.
Should we look
It
at 'em?
borrows a lot from the language of New York.
Right.
And briefly, what New York does is they do a couple things. Not only do they allow for public consumption wherever tobacco is allowed, which is something we've been talking about, which should be familiar, but also they, in statute, they define consumption as smoking and non-smoking. And then they say that landlords cannot prohibit non-smoking, but they can prohibit, just like tobacco, smoking. But it puts, in New York State, they put the onus on the landowner, not the tenant. And that, I think that's important. And that's something that we ask that you all consider, if not this year, the next year.
Yeah, I think the best thing on consumption, quite honestly, given, as Keisha has already mentioned, this would need to go to judiciary and to health and welfare. I think teeing this up for next year as a proposal, looking at what all the states currently do, because we have lots of data on other states, would be really helpful for us.
And I apologize. Mentally, I felt like the thread from producer permit, like event permits, to owning your land, I thought we were still there in terms of looking at the language for number 2.
We can go back up to number 2 now. I just wanted to skip over because we were talking about social equity with number 1, because that's sort of off the table.
Okay.
I wanted to just jump to the next category, which really dealt with
I mean, I
those
think
communities we're talking about.
I think 2 is like classic economic development discussion. How do we level the playing field in the market? So I don't know if others want to spend time on that.
That's where
Sure, I think you were just finishing up on the equity
Okay.
piece.
we're planning on going
Agreed.
to that producer event right now, but I would just say in terms of the recommendation to go to judiciary, you know, it's really complicated to know what the heck to do
Yeah.
with this issue. No committee. We've tried to go to health and welfare so many times.
Right.
We've got no time there.
So on
We-
the,
well,
sorry, Graham, I missed the beginning of that.
It's
On the
really hard,
equity issue,
like, you're just going to go to judiciary and health and welfare. What I'm saying is like, there's two committees of jurisdiction on this issue. There's House
There's
Government
many,
Operations and
yeah.
there's Senate Economic Development.
Yeah,
We need help
yeah,
getting in those other committees and knowing where to go in the situations, because we are coming to the committees of jurisdiction and we have quite frankly not gotten much of any support in getting those issues that are in there that they think may not go to other committees, into those committees and dealt with for years.
go to Senator Vyhovsky.
She actually introduced the whole bill for us 2 years ago.
Right.
That's where that language came from for public consumption.
Yes, I know, but it came here and then recently someone said this is entirely a question of penalties and judicial committee jurisdiction. So we didn't know that
Understandable.
either.
right.
Great, thank you.
So, given
Given our focus on economic
our
development,
focus right
And she's
now,
on judiciary.
yes.
producer event permits, your
Yes,
number two.
so this is us revising the CCB as one. I can read a little bit here. As introduced, the CCB's Cannabis Showcase event permit doesn't allow for equitable participation or any profit share by producers. We propose amending the bill to allow for direct sales for producers, licensed cultivators and manufacturers in the pilot program. This pilot program will be done with language specifying its intention to prepare for expanded direct sales for small cultivators and manufacturers at events and on and off site. Retail licensees already can host on-site events. They already basically can host cannabis showcase events at their sites. They can host them on site at which they invite cultivators and manufacturers directly meet consumers, showcase their products, just like the CCB language proposes. The express need from the CCB is to understand how to appropriately and effectively regulate and administer direct sales for cultivators and manufacturers. And the express need from cultivators and manufacturers is greater economic agency and profitability through direct sales to consumers. So what we've offered here is a proposal that represents truly incremental progression, because last time we were talking about progression, we told you we would not support this bill. This is not progress. For the regulatory community, this represents progression for the legislature. It represents progression for the small businesses trying to be profitable in a fundamentally inequitable state-regulated market. Currently, the CCB has closed the window on accessing a retail license, which is currently the only method of having agency and greater market share over the sales of your product. And producers have very few, if any, available avenues for marketing their products and surviving as businesses in the current regulatory environment.
Right.
As Lieutenant Governor said.
Thomas?
So this makes, from all my hallway conversations, I support this. This makes sense for us to do, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from Chair Pepper as to what concerns there might be on broadening these event
Right.
permits to do what you're describing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there's some regulatory issues and I mean, we have, anyway, we'll
Yeah, well,
hear
I can
from-
walk you a little bit more through it here. And Jeff, you're welcome to go, but we did include a findings section, which essentially I think is important to address sort of to contextualize why we're doing this, because I think what the CC brought forth didn't really address any of the needs that why we're doing this, why we're here talking about this. Some of the other language, we took out retailers, we included cultivators and manufacturers. If you go to 1A, oh geez, I'm sorry. Let's drop it.
We have two, and then we have a proposed language that you have.
Yep, 2. So if you go down to 2, you'll see findings, it's highlighted.
Right.
That's proposed language to contextualize it. You'll see we changed the name to producer event, changed from retailers to cultivators and manufacturers. We defined what cultivators and manufacturers can sell. We came down and talked about what towns may or may not do. We specifically said that these producer events are not subject to opt-in. We sort of contextualized the extent to which municipalities can functionally prohibit these events from happening. We got rid of some of the CCB language. For example, number 5, actual capacity and intent to administer and enforce and apply the required plans. That just felt like a window for the CCB to sort of use its own discretion in it.
Sorry, number 5 I have is proof of commercially reasonable insurance.
Yes, we changed that to number 5, but the one that's crossed out says actual capacity and intent to administer and enforce and apply required plans. We think that's just sort of implicit in applying for a permit, and you can sort of see that. And you go down to E.
Intent I get, like that feels weird to include intent. maybe,
Yes.
obviously you should have the intent to do that.
Your favorite section of a bill?
I
as
know,
recall.
Capacity seems like we're gonna get in trouble down the road with our colleagues if we don't leave some consideration for capacity.
They've demonstrated the capacity and ability to meet the regulatory requirements to.
Right.
Yes,
So-
that you're gonna have a
Yeah.
a
That makes-
security
sure.
person or
So
whatever.
on that issue, are cultivators or manufacturers allowed to collect tax?
Right now, they're
So I
already.
think that's one of the
yes,
issues.
Yes, right now, they're already asked to require, to use a sales and use certificate. So they're going through the
So
motion.
but my question to you is, I mean, are either of you license holders?
We've got a cultivator right here. Sarah, you want to jump in?
No, I know, we're gonna hear from
Okay.
in a sec, but who in this, of cultivators and manufacturers, who's able to actually collect tax if you had a showcase? Because that's why the retailers sort of
Certainly.
the umbrella for it, because
Well,
they're.
they both, would. All parties involved with point of sale, would have a tax burden.
But are they able now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
They're already making sales.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they collect tax.
Josh, I know you're enthusiastic, but we're gonna hear from you in a minute. So hold
It's a
on.
non-issue.
I also say, I direct you to Myra Adams. Myra Adams sent you all some really great testimony last week. She's a tier 1 cultivator in southern Vermont. She gave you very discrete ways that she felt the small cultivator could, objectively track and trace the whole system. She talked about what she's already doing, and I think it's really helpful written testimony for you to look at.
Right.
Um,
But and to everybody who's watching, we have appreciated all the input people have said. So thank you, and we have it all.
So let's say too, so if you go down to, we crossed out C,
Okay.
E, and now made it F, and that says it said formerly the board may adopt rules and forms necessary to implement this section, and we said the board must adopt rules and forms. And if you go down to the bottom, which is sort of the section the CCD had at the beginning, which was incomplete, we changed a bunch of the language around there about the reporting. And what we essentially did is we changed it around from the viability of offering cannabis retail sales remotely to what Lieutenant Governor was saying is that we need to come here next year ready to get more flexible on and off farm direct sales. And what this directs the CCBDs to is to present a concise assessment of the benefits, challenges, and what the CCB needs to equitably and effectively administer cannabis direct sales for licensed cultivators and manufacturers not subject to opt-in
So
events.
sorry, I have lost you, where you're under,
It's not a section because it was at the very bottom it's right above
The last paragraph.
the very last paragraph before we get into public consumption number 3.
okay, yes, just before public consumption.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it doesn't have a
okay.
section blank.
That's okay.
But essentially, it just clarifies the intent, which is that CCB needs to come back and report on how to administer these sales on and off farm at events going forward, as opposed to whether they can or not. We included point of sales because that's been a point brought up, so they need to discuss that. And again, it's not just talking about optimizing market access for small cultivators, but also manufacturers on and off site.
Okay.
And I will say another thing that we changed with our language here is, it wasn't really I didn't see it in the language that was on the website from the CCB, but to 5, the limited number of events to 5. We made this an unlimited number of events.
So I believe the CCB, and we're gonna hear from Pepper and Gabe, but it's just in terms of what their staff can manage at the moment. I mean, they also have limited capacity.
We've
So
spoken
we
to
talk
staff.
about capacity, we have to
We
appreciate everybody's.
we have talked to them, their staff, and we did recommend that the chief compliance officer be brought in to testify as well. So if we did pick up some contingency language, if retailers are included, or if the number of events are limited, here's what we would need in the language. More licensed manufacturers and cultivators per event. Currently, there's a very limited number, I think.
No, I thought it was a minimum of 3.
Right, we're saying if you're gonna limit the number of events or include retailers, you need to include more licensed cultivators and manufacturers, because this is not gonna have any economic impact on these people otherwise. We need guaranteed market share for manufacturers and cultivators. So in the CCB's current language, which includes retailers as point of sales operators, there's no guaranteed market share for the cultivators and manufacturers who are more or less like mascots for those events. They come there with no guaranteed sales revenue. So what we need is something like 90% of sales from those producers and manufacturers goes to them, and they figure out the rest of the summer. Some really substantial amount of sales that those producers and manufacturers are guaranteed if we're gonna have this year.
Isn't the whole point of this to give cultivators a moment to showcase their product. Not necessarily a moment, the retailers, as far as I understand it, are the umbrella enabling the tax and the sale and the regulated market. But that this is a showcase for the growers, for the cultivators. And I don't think you can ever guarantee anything at a farmer's market or at a showcase, but you could certainly guarantee that it's a showcase for the cultivators, for the growers, and that they're the ones selling.
Any farmer goes to a farmer's market, you don't have to profit share any of what you're getting from those customers at the market.
Right.
And that's what we're talking. We were never here to talk about showcasing. Retailers can already showcase. They can invite cultivators, manufacturers to their business.
Are they doing it?
We have a few we have one here who
Right.
testifies to it. This has never been about showcasing. Like we had a conversation actually amongst cultivators saying, do we even want to come out for a permanent event? Like, is it going to make an economic difference? And, for farmers, like you go to a farmer's market, it's often more of a branding opportunity than it is a business viability decision. In this case, what we decided is we need to make real progressive steps forward. And if we get cultivators and manufacturers directly selling, we do not believe we need retailers' point of sale system. We do not believe we need them for tax collection, et cetera. We believe that can be done otherwise. And that's what we need to pilot.
This is a pilot.
That's it, exactly. This is a pilot. So we need to pilot what's currently not being done. We don't need to pilot decentralized retail sales. All you'd be piloting in that situation is putting the current retail shop in another location with a fence around it, and whether or not you can keep people out of it. If you, like underage people, et cetera, if you want to actually be piloting something that's not possible and they're returning from the CCB, they don't know how to administer, then we are talking about cultivator manufacturer direct sales, and that's the only thing, quite frankly, we've been here to talk about. We would not support a showcase that it's quite frankly insulting to the cultivators and manufacturers who are being asked to be mascots in an event and get no guaranteed profit share from it. They already don't have enough time to drive the product around the state, to do the work they need to make a livelihood. There's no reason for them to go to an event to just stand there and show their product.
No, the whole objective is to stand there and sell their product.
Adding to the conversation, before us is an article, outdated state regulations are stifling the cannabis industry. This is a piece of, and I'll share this with the committee.
That to all.
Yes, I will. And this was authored by Bo Whitney. He is out of Washington State, one of the leading economists for the cannabis sector. What he's determined is a intermediary-centered regulatory framework, which is the status quo, which is what basically every adult use state has to date, dating to the first state that legalized, which was Colorado back in 2012, 2014, is bad economics. It is not working. We are seeing crisis unfold in each state. What we are trying to do is prevent that. We look at California, Oregon, Washington State. They're introducing legislation to bail out their small producers. We want to get ahead of this. Y'all did a really good job standing up this market. We will lose that progress if we don't take these measures. This is why we are leaning into this pilot program to begin that conversation here in Vermont ahead of this issue that will land on our plate. You've heard us use the word collapse before. This is what Bo refers to in his, I will share this article with you all.
Terrific. So let's just keep going. Public consumption, I think we're
We did
definitely.
that one, but we already,
Yeah.
so a few other of those contingencies. So if the CCB comes back and says we need retailers, we need limited numbers of events, then we also need safeguards on the selection of cultivators and manufacturers. For example, a lot of people have shares of ownership in other businesses or are vertically integrated. If they're going to retail-centered events, they shouldn't continue to serve the same small group of highly capitalized people who, for example, have shares in cultivation businesses or manufacturing businesses that are vertically integrated. And costs for them to attend the event which aren't exploitative.
Right.
We'd also need manufacturers and cultivators at the event. They must be wholly independent of the retail cannabis establishment and its affiliates who will be showcased at the events. And if limited, then we need a sunset on that limited number of events, after which we have an unlimited number of events.
Well,
So basically
I
say
think
like,
the whole point of a pilot is, quite honestly, it's assessed after it's done.
so that's my point. Then if we have a limited number, if that's the pilot, then we're saying you put a sunset on it, and after that, there's an unlimited number of events. It's saying you all need to get here because you need to be responsible for these businesses. They are going to fail.
Keisha.
I often my brain goes to alcohol, how we regulate that and do events. And my sense there is, you have, you have a special license for serving at events, right? You have a bartending license.
Right.
So I'm kind of looking at the CCB because I would just imagine that we we ask our retailers to carry a different level of responsibility for paying attention to someone's level of impairment. And that comes with special liability as well. So they have special liability insurance to be able to offer that service. I am not opposed at all to creating that possibility here. I do think that's what it would take to build the comfort level in that either a retailer and a cultivator are required to partner on this permit, or there's a special license that isn't just about a one-off event, but is like, I'm sure bartender licensing, you go through like a safety course if you have it otherwise.
Anybody who serves it.
We can respond to all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah, sure, sorry.
we'd like to respond if possible to those questions.
Okay, great, because I need you to sort of, if you can, I think that some of these are obviously things we're gonna have to talk
Sure.
about next year.
You know, I will say, with regards to insurance, great question.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's again, the plus of a retailer being the umbrella, is
Yes.
that they are insured.
well, certainly, and so are, producers right now as well. And in our conversation with local insurers, about this event permit, we had extensive conversations with a couple of
Okay.
them.
Okay,
Those that currently issue insurance to licensees in the state.
great.
Really, to summarize and keep it brief, consumption makes it very, very challenging. That makes it costly, and there will be way more than just basic event insurance that's needed. Right now,
Oh, absolutely.
yes, so right now,
Yeah.
if there's no consumption involved, if there's just point of sale, as we've been talking about for all licensees, not just retailers,
Right,
there really is no issue, and there's not much of a cost burden.
right.
From an insurance perspective, so
Right.
it's accessible, it's possible, as long as we keep those things in mind.
Yeah,
So,
And from a training perspective, in all of our different proposals, including this one, this goes to the CCD for rulemaking to address things like training, et cetera, et cetera. So there'd be
Okay,
things put in place to make sure that people in those positions would have the training they need to be part of the
Right.
rulemaking process.
right.
right.
If, I guess, it is a question maybe the CCB can begin to answer in finance, if that would be a special license with its own associated.
Well, that we would discuss here, actually, because we do with alcohol, we do all those license permits.
It's
here.
true, I mean, I was trying to.
Yeah, no,
Not-
the fee is not ours, but the
slow down.
licensing.
Yeah.
Let's just, I'll quickly try to
Okay.
roll you through this. So again, we're mostly sticking our top 4 priorities. The last one is around ag status and use. And the main thing I want to focus on here is we still have not heard this outdoor setting report. And
The
this
outdoor,
outdoor setting report the legislature asked for last year when you all voted to allow municipalities.
has an ag heard it?
No. This-
What?
Well, we've been in ag.
Why would
CCB has been in ag. They didn't report on it. They didn't report on the other report to you on social equity either. So this is why we're a little skeptical of being like, let's put a report in. We'll come back next year and talk about it.
Right.
Really? So
hope so.
I'm pointing again to you wrote a bill last year to put out a business in Essex. This business, the CCB has said, is going to affect 12 other farms. JFO, I don't think was consulted on that. We have a lot of recommendations the CCB has made in their report, which to amend that, because it's not appropriate.
Right, and sadly, I mean, I hate to say this, but at this point,
I understand, but I do say that to contextualize.
we definitely need to address that.
Just to contextualize, and if you go to number 11, so a number of pages on, I'm gonna bump the fee schedule reform. So we put this on here because, and I know we're not gonna talk about fees here, I think this is more economic development than the fees.
But we are gonna be sending a fee proposal to finance, so
We just wanted
we wanna
to
make sure it's the right
briefly
fee.
comment on this. We supported what Lieutenant Governor was saying, except for keeping indoor tiers 1 and 2 the same as they are, which I think he came back to say as well. But what we have proposed here is striking indoor cultivation tier 4 and 5. So I think it's a good transition from the municipal regulations from last year, because without any analysis from JFO, and in order to put one business out of business, you're affecting a dozen other businesses, we know, at least from the CCB's initial reports. We've been a lot of conversation about market saturation in this committee. We have recommended there's only one indoor tier 4 license. There's only one indoor tier 5 license. Those are 2 businesses. We know at least one of them is an MSO, a multi-state operator.
Sorry, say that again, there's only one indoor
One
five.
tier 4 indoor, one tier 5 indoor. It's 2 businesses. They have a disproportionate impact on production in the marketplace. If we're really talking about saturation, we're talking about equity, it's been a goal of ours from the very beginning. It's been a goal of the Lieutenant Governor from the very beginning to not even have these tiers in place. No one thought twice about it when you almost potentially put out of business 12 outdoor cultivators last year. So we're saying, now you know, here's 2 who we support not putting out of business, but asking to go down to tier 3, which is just what, you know, this is very similar to others, but we think it's actually rational and makes a lot of sense to do this from an equity perspective. So there would be some minor impacts on the budget, but again, they would, rather than paying this $36,000 fee or $16,000 fee, they'd be bumping down to tier 3. And if you increase the fees, that'd actually be the same fee as tier 4 is paying right now. So you'd essentially just be losing 72 minus, you know, there'd be another $30,000, $40,000, whatever, is $50,000 lost. But again, for us, it's not a question of income, it's a question of market equity. And if we're gonna talk about saturation, we're gonna talk about closing retail stores, you should really talk about closing the largest indoor producers who are a disproportionate impact in the industry and we're really, yeah. I don't know if you want to say anything else about that.
Yeah, okay.
Help me understand this. I think I have a stupid question, but are those multi-state operators, can they still be bringing product from out of state that saturates the
They're not
market?
allowed
They
to.
cannot.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
We hope they're not.
So,
Well,
okay,
just like, none of our, sadly, none of our craft,
Right, not yet.
buds can go out of state.
Sure.
okay. I thought we had that problem with concentration of like hemp products or
No,
something.
it's all
So I got
in-state.
confused.
Exactly, they're all
they-
interesting.
It's
So
not
we're-
necessarily in-state consumption, but it's
Okay.
in-state.
So
Exactly.
you're just saying, don't,
Just strike those licenses.
Okay.
When it comes to renewal, they go down to tier 3 if they want to renew.
okay. I mean, to be fair, you're right that we might have put too much attention on this one poor guy in Essex that had a lot of controversy surrounding his operation. But we did have him speak to our committee because of the disproportionate impact on just 1 or 2 businesses. So, you know, I don't think we could do this without hearing from those operations.
Right.
I just want to clarify, we're not putting them out of business. We're just saying they have to, you didn't hear from the 12 other operators who were affected by last year's bill.
You're
Yeah.
just saying take the big ones,
We're
the
saying just get rid of
multi-staters
those
down to
tiers, they
tier
can
3.
now re-up at a tier 3.
And I will add that the CCB has developed rules to do as such to relegate or scale up. And that's something they can maybe speak to. So this is something the agency's already been exploring.
Are
So
they
this-
gonna tell us they've invested, like,
They might, but what about
$1
those 12 outdoor businesses last year?
well, I
And those
think
are
we should,
multi-state
I
operators.
think
One of
we
those is
should
multi-state
change
operators.
that. I have also felt like I don't know what happened in agriculture because last biennium, agriculture refused to look at outdoor cultivation as an agricultural issue. So I haven't heard anything about the upshot of last year
Of the
because we
report.
haven't talked as
Right.
much about outdoor cultivation.
So I just need to have you two finish up and then we're gonna turn to our indoor and outdoor culture.
I just wanted to clarify that the Senate and House Ag have both heard us this year, and they are the ones who put in place the current ag status exemptions we have. That's the right to farm, protection from nuisance, and it's a lot of other ones. So, and they did hear Jason last year, and I think of that issue as well, but it was ultimately government operations in this committee which decided on these setbacks. I think you're right, those decisions should go to ag. I would
Yeah,
love to see
I asked them to take that.
But
issue.
ag needs to then be active and take it up.
So the only last thing I think I want to mention, just very briefly, is that, we talked about these permits. You saw Myra's testimony, you'll probably hear from others, that the permits aren't going to meet the needs. We have number 10 is an alternative option for direct sales, which is essentially like a direct sales endorsement, and that's what Lieutenant Governor, that's where we want to move to. This time next year, we should be having a conversation about on and off farm direct sales and easily accessible endorsement to be doing that. And there's language we have here for that option right now, but that's where we're heading. That's number 10 on the list, and if you'll hear from most people in our cultivator groups, they say that's what we need. What we actually are asking for is not what they need, and it may not keep them in the business, but we're trying to get something.
So as you know, there is no other state that does direct sales. So our challenge is going to be figuring out exactly that and how you, in a regulated market that's still illegal federally, how we manage that. Direct sales to me was black market. Direct sales is what we, in some
Actually,
ways,
can we respond to that?
we're trying. Yeah, I will,
Right,
but I mean,
right.
just, I'm saying as a layperson,
Right.
direct sales is what we were, I know, Josh, I'm with you. You're gonna get your chance. But I think for many of us, the whole point of creating a regulated market was to get away from direct sales. In some ways, now we have a market, it's different. But I think for many of us, we have equated direct sales to the black market. And so we're gonna, and with no other state doing this, we're not about to be the first one with 2 days to go before the end of, we have to arch and.
I just want to point out, we've asked for this for years, and that is a dangerous conflation to make. I would say that most of the problematic illicit sales happening in Vermont, underground sales prior to regulation, were probably actually, the people who were doing direct sales or cultivators were probably making responsible sales. The pounds of cannabis coming in from California, Oregon, Washington, that was wholesale, probably more directly beating what was the underground market at the time. You're talking about legacy cultivators who are doing direct sales. That is what we want our market to be based on. That is exactly what we want our market to be based on.
And
No, and I appreciate that. I just,
And I think it's a fair question. And, you know, if we look at the enabling statutes, original intent, which was Act 164 in 2020, that is to, and this came from the General Assembly, right? To transition the legacy market in an equitable manner.
Yeah.
So meeting them where they're at, if they're, right, okay, so.
Right. I think we do have to be really careful, Madam Chair, too, because we are always walking a fine line of ensuring we don't push people back to the illicit market
Agreed.
because they either can't make enough money or meet the regulatory barriers of the
right.
regulated market.
And we also have to balance market saturation
Certainly.
with, you know, how do we manage that? How do we manage that to both benefit cultivators, manufacturers, and our consumers?
And if I may close, a couple things. First of all, we're looking at on my screen, these are administrative rules that the CCB developed around direct sales for propagators. So this is not new. This is something that they've engaged this last rules amendment process. This is just for seeds and living plants. So I just want to share, we're starting that conversation in the agency. It's not far. And I also want to close on a familiar, I don't want to shift to our, but on a familiar subject matter that we have been talking about, which is this retailer citing in section 4 of 321, which in effect the industry is calling a moratorium on retail sales. What we have before us right here is proposed rule 172. 172 is a rule that the CCB developed coming out of the last legislative session for retail citing. The language that's in section 4 now that pauses retail licensing is bad economics. We have some towns that maybe have too many stores. We have too many towns that don't have enough stores.
But that
So-
goes to our opt.
It does. Why do we have that, Chair? It's because of opt-in policy. So we've got a patchwork of towns. We've got 247 localities in the state. About 78 of them allowed for or voted in retail sales. So that's a patchwork of towns that allowed it and towns that didn't allow it. So because of that infrastructure, that policy, we have saturation in some towns and then deserts in other towns. We ask that you remove that from the bill to not have a pause statewide. That is bad economics. And what I have on our screen here is language that came out of last session that already allows the CCB to throttle retail licensing. This work is done. This work is done. So the
Or it's
intention.
there as a possibility to be implemented.
Exactly. So that means if Burlington, you know, if someone puts in a license for, right, a retail license in Burlington, the CCB has the means already right now to say no. So that's why I said the pause is
Right.
bad
So-
economics.
I heard the Lieutenant Governor also ask for a moratorium on cultivators.
Yes, we'd rather that was in response to
so-
retail moratorium though. That was in
Okay.
response.
So
So
how do you
He
feel
said,
about?
yeah, he disagreed when asked.
Yes.
He didn't support a retail moratorium or
Exactly.
a moratorium when it came down.
and I'm just
Okay.
highlighting, we already work on this
Right.
in the industry. They have the mechanism to do this. The intention of section 4 is to put a pause statewide. That's bad economics.
So,
That's-
but I would ask you, if we have a glut in the market, would a pause in the cultivation is not something that
It would
you
not
would,
resolve anything. We would
so
still
you
have a
just want
glut.
it to just be.
We don't have
supply and
we think we have a bottleneck. That's why we're here talking about direct sales.
Right.
Jeff just said about how many towns are in the state and how many have retail opportunities and how much.
We need more shelf space.
Well, and
Towns that can afford it.
They did propose another market solution, which is limiting the largest
Indoor.
indoor tier cultivation. That's very different. I
That's
would,
limiting it, that's the proposal from 5 to 3.
yes, from having any 4 or 5 tier licenses. I would agree that an economic development committee should take very careful thought about a moratorium in a market. That's, a last resort kind of measure for a state government to place a moratorium in an industry.
Many see it as self-serving. For some most retailers aren't even asking for this. This is not an issue. We've already tackled it. It's almost like we should be using this time to talk about other things.
Right.
So,
Thank you. This is terrific. And now I think we had asked when you were last here, any questions before?
Where did the moratorium come from? I can't even remember.
We'll hear from Pepper. It
Okay.
came from the House.
yeah, it did not come from the agency. I don't think they supported it.
I don't think it came.
Oh, it just came from the House. Okay. I was like,
There's no.
why are we
just.
talking about
It came
this?
from- It's in our bill. It
Okay.
came from the House.
But the interesting thing we should know is that I don't know what House Commerce did to take a look at it, but we are the only economic development committee that has
Agreed.
possession of
I do
it.
not believe House Commerce looked at it.
Then we should take very
It does not.
seriously what a moratorium in a market.
This
does.
might be we would really appreciate your support in looking at committees of jurisdiction on this issue and determining a different way to deal with this. Because
Yes.
Clearly, you all have enough time and
I
us enough
agree.
time. We need to figure it out.
Well, the Senate is always,
Well, government operations
Tight.
is completely not really even, I don't understand why it's in that committee. There's a lot of other ones. that
We
are-
have that
It's
issue with
economic
tobacco, we have it without, it does happen a lot with.
okay. Next to, Tito, hi, yes, I've been seeing your head go up and down. Tito, welcome. And for the rest of everybody in the room who are new, Amy, you've been here, but many of you are new. Let's just introduce ourselves, because I don't think you have been here before.
Well, everybody calls me Tito.
Okay, but let's introduce ourselves first.
Okay, sorry.
Hi, Tito, I'm Tom Chittenden. I represent the Southeast Quadrants of Chittenden County.
Keisha Rum Hinsdale, Majority Leader of same district.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Randy Brock, Franklin County and Northern Grand Isle County.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Can I ask, is there anybody sitting around the room that is not going to be in the witness chair?
Yes,
That-
there are a couple that are,
that
because
can
we're
introduce
really
themselves.
focusing, we wanted to hear from indoor and outdoor growers
Okay.
before we move. And we're hearing from Josh, Tito, and
Sarah.
Sarah. Hi.
Okay,
Right, because we've heard from Amy and we have, and then Aaron Shaw.
okay,
Oh, hi.
okay, great, okay, I just wanted to make sure. we-
Okay. Tito, it's yours. Introduce yourself and take it away.
So Adam Gross, everybody calls me Tito, and I own a dispensary in downtown Burlington called Fern Gallery Cannabis, and then a tier 2 indoor grow called Fern Legacy in Addison County, and also a tier 2 manufacturing company. And so I want to thank John Rogers for including me and bringing us all together and always working on this. But boy, we are just so frustrated. Everything is so slow. I really thought that I'd be here at this point a few years in. We'd be talking about lounges and concerts or even like a cafe. I mean, could you imagine you go for your Sunday brunch and you have a mimosa, but how nice would it be to have a cannabis drink at that same cafe? That feels like just years and years away. So we're just bummed at how slow everything is going. And as far as
It's how many years have we had this market? Only 3.
it feels like 100. As somebody who's trying to navigate
Okay.
through, it all, it's incredibly difficult. As a retailer, as a grower, it doesn't matter what you are, unless maybe you're one of those tier 4 or 5 indoors who's super well funded. I don't know one single person that's doing great, not one. So it's a literal struggle. It doesn't matter what aspect of the industry they're even in. Every single person I know is struggling.
Can I ask a dumb question?
No, it's not I'm sure it's not a dumb question.
I thought once
Yes.
upon a time there was like Pacific Rim, that place in Burlington, whatever it is, it was Milk and Moth.
The milkweed, yeah.
Is it still there?
I don't think.
I thought at
Milkweed now.
Okay, I thought
Monarch
at
and
one
Milkweed.
point, Monarch and the Milkweed,
Yeah.
they had edibles that were packaged.
Yeah.
And you could go in and you could get your croissant and a
Mhm.
coffee and a packaged
It was
edible.
CBD. It was all CBD.
Oh, okay.
So in the beginning, before we started all this, we all pretended with CBD. We all started our own CBD dispensaries and CBD
Yeah.
businesses and everything. Which arguably, look, it's great stuff medically. The CBD really changes things. But
Okay.
as businesses, we all had to kind of figure this out before we could get to the starting line. So
Okay.
that's what I think you were seeing there.
That I really, this is not something, I have two small
Yeah.
children, I have no idea what is
So,
happening in the market.
Tito, you had a chance to look at what is before us
Yeah.
and what is realistic for this year.
Totally.
Let us know how you feel about it.
Okay, so, I have a whole bunch of stuff about public consumption, but I'm not gonna waste everybody's time.
Save it for next year.
Yeah.
And let's engage in a realistic proposal for next year.
Sure. And for that, it feels like just what New York did is a great place to start. Just everywhere you can have a cigarette, you should be able to smoke a joint. At least it doesn't involve insurance or any of these super complex issues that the rest of the nation isn't really there yet. It's just one simple sentence, just wherever you can have a cigarette, you can enjoy a joint. Seems like it's just a basic place to start. There's 120 retail locations or something like that, but where are we supposed to smoke? There's just nowhere, so it just doesn't make sense. But as far as the direct-to-consumer, which feels like the real point of being here,
Well, the showcases that are proposed.
Yeah.
this summer.
As a retailer and a grower, this just feels like a lateral move to nowhere. It doesn't really make any sense to me, because in reality, the retailers that are running this event are gonna just include the small growers and manufacturers that they're already working with. I don't know one single retailer that's not working with small manufacturers, maybe except for that one situation in Middlebury. But, I think everybody pretty much carries, small manufacturers and growers, because that's the majority of what we are. So if they're running these public events, they're just gonna feature those same people. So it's not gonna accomplish anything. If the idea is to get money into the hands of small growers, which I think is incredibly important, you guys did do a great job at starting things off really well, giving small growers a chance in Vermont, which in other states, they don't have that chance. And these other states, the scenes are terrible. I'm a lover of cannabis. There's nothing that makes me want to go to New Jersey for that scene. It's all just so bad. These big companies, there's no innovation, there's no excitement. It's all very homogeneous products. It's not a fun place to be. And with global warming getting worse, our ski industry is going to go away eventually. How great would it be to replace it with this vibrant cannabis scene that people would come from all over the world to see if we could keep progressing this? But so if the point is to put, the money into the hands of small growers, I've only heard one thing that makes any sense this whole time. And that was what my friend Ben, who Lieutenant Governor Rogers mentioned earlier, Tier 1 outdoor grower. There already exists a framework for animal farmers that feels like we fit perfectly into. So, for example, a pig farmer can sell an entire pig to a citizen. They got to fill out paperwork saying they're not going to resell it or manufacture with it or anything, and that's it. So, how perfect would it be for the small grower, the small Tier 1 outdoor grower, to say, okay, this plant, I can sell this entire plant to this citizen. They'll fill out the paperwork, and that's it. Because in reality, I love this idea for two reasons. Number one, it doesn't add to the pressure that retailers are already feeling. So we have this density issue in these small cities, and the problem with cannabis not being evenly spread out through the state. And so these customers that would be buying this whole plant, these are really not customers who are shopping in dispensaries anyway. So really, it feels like it accomplishes that main goal of bringing the legacy market into this, and in a way that puts money directly in small growers' hands, because they won't make it. Like I bet you a third of the whole industry is not going to make it. Forget the smallest growers. I think a lot of people aren't going to, even ones who are relatively business savvy.
So on the moratorium, you're also a retailer. You are, I guess, what we call an integrated.
No, I'm not an integrated. I'm just
So you're a retailer
Yeah.
and a grower and a consumer.
Yes.
You're a lot of things.
yeah.
So how are you feeling as a retailer on the moratorium?
Call it whatever you want. Just don't want another store in Burlington. It's just so many. It's
So how about Montpelier? You said I thought you said you had a retail shop here in Montpelier.
in Burlington.
Oh, in Burlington.
Yeah.
But can we go back to Burlington for a second? Can Burlington say no more? I mean, they say no more cabaret licenses. They have a very limited number of cabaret licenses for places that can sell alcohol.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I guess.
Yeah, that's right, they control.
But it
Huh?
comes back to.
CCB has the control to say no. It's already.
Okay, so we'll hear from
Okay.
Pepper. We'll hear from Pepper in a minute.
So a local town that opts in does not have the ability to say, we want to have 8 stores only in Burlington or something? They don't have that
I
ability?
don't think towns have that ability.
No,
We'll hear from Pepper.
Okay, can you get the insert?
Do you wanna answer it now?
I'm happy to answer.
We're gonna answer it in the moment.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Sure.
I thought you
So the town
Just
has
introduce
several
yourself.
options when they feel like they've hit the saturation point.
Yeah,
One is their citizens can opt out. We've seen that in Springfield. So they've opted in and subsequently opted out. So that would stop any new retailer.
when they opt out, they don't close down the existing retailers. They say that's
Convert.
enough and they can only opt out.
But-
They can't, what if like they have 8 licenses and one goes out of business? Can they then give that license to somebody else? That's what happens with Cabaret.
I think that's what John was speaking to.
So you wrote a section, well, the original legislation wrote a section called local governance that kind of describes what local authority they have over siting. And it's a little bit ambiguous. I think every town would tell you that they don't understand what authority they have under that.
Why didn't GovOps work on that?
Hasn't been sent to us.
Um,
Oh, it wasn't
have-
house come up, right?
It says that you have all your traditional authority as a town over zoning and signage and time, place, manner restrictions. However, you can't pass ordinances that are so restricted that they would prohibit the establishment from operating. So people don't know how those two things play with one another.
And also, it's a big effort to have another vote for an opt-out, quite frankly.
Essentially, what people are saying is you can zone cannabis the way you would zone retail or commerce, but you can't zone a cannabis store specifically. You can't have a cannabis specific ordinance. That's how many towns are reading it.
We should fix that.
So but to go to what Amy just said, you CCB could,
We were given a tremendous amount of regulatory and rulemaking authority. Never once was there a mention of retail siting. All we had the ability to do was open and close application windows statewide. And when we got to kind of 80 towns, we voted or 80 stores right around there. We voted as a board to close the application window for new retailers. Of course, we wrote into our rules that we give the industry 30 days notice before we actually stop. And a lot of people, not knowing what the future may hold, that we were partially through, kind of, their Act 250 permit or whatever else, just kind of rushed in the door in that kind of 30-day window.
How many rushed through the door?
We're up to 111, I think.
Thank you.
right, so we saw that in Woodstock. And yeah, I mean, so we're also
yeah.
in a bit of a glut.
So it's it comes back to that opt-out, opt-in, so basically until we figure that out, if there could be, whether it's through CCB or through you guys, if there is some kind of pause, whatever we call it, until we figure it out so that the dispensaries in the towns of concentration could spread out. In Burlington, I'm sure if they could.
So sorry, Tito,
Yeah.
you do support a pause for them to
Yeah,
refigure this?
I just don't know exactly what to call it, because it sounds like some of the points that were made earlier kind of rubbed off on me. That does seem dangerous to say a moratorium if the CCB can control it. But I admittedly sometimes don't understand who controls what in these things, and I'm constantly have to be
Okay,
reminded of that.
But you think a pause for the CCB to have an opportunity to rethink how we geographically distribute?
Yeah,
And I think that's what the objective is of
Yeah.
this pause.
yeah.
I don't agree. I don't know if I could
Okay,
speak because,
Well-
and while we have all these folks here.
right, we're gonna have a chance to do that,
Okay.
but I'd love to have Tito finish because we only have another
Okay.
half hour.
Sure.
So,
And so,
and we have to hear from
Mhm.
Aaron and Sarah and Josh.
but I'll wrap it up quick. But and then as far as my view on the tier pricing is a little bit different. I don't agree with raising indoor tier 2 and 3. I, as an indoor tier 2 grower, I'm still not even taking a paycheck from any of this. It's like we are truly struggling big time. And I consult for a tier 3, and I'll tell you, nobody's getting rich over there, I guarantee it. But these tier 4s and 5s, absolutely, let's just close those licenses altogether. I'm 100% in favor for that. And then lower the price for these outdoor growers so that they can stand a chance. And then just in general, it feels like whenever rule is being made, it's like everything is designed to keep us pinned right up against the line of barely making it, And it's just incredibly frustrating, whether it's the restricted advertising or the crippling compliance tracking. I have a staff member whose whole job is just to follow the comings and goings of every gram of cannabis. Can you imagine if every bar or restaurant had to track every single drop of liquor that went out of every bottle. That would be the end. That would be the end of the restaurants and bars.
I thought they did to
I
some
think they
extent.
do pretty much track that, but anyway, Randy.
And this is a
Well,
question,
the bartender, there's no tracking anyway.
not just for you, but for
For the
all the
owner.
folks that testify. And that is, what has been the effect of this on the illegal market?
Well, now it feels like we've kind of hit like this stagnation point where the black market is still there and doing great. And
Or is it doing better than you are because of the regulations and restrictions?
I don't know if I can answer that.
Do you have any sense or feel for that?
I get a sense that we've stagnated. That's what I feel. I feel like everybody got onto this highway in the beginning and now it's just gridlock. Everybody is wherever they started and nobody can move or get any elbow room anywhere
Well,
else.
there's one other thing that I'm looking for, and that would be for a combination from the Cannabis Board and also from the Department of Liquor and Lotteries. Because there is a parallel between what we do in terms of regulation of liquor. I'd like to see almost a side-by-side, if you will, as to how we deal with taxation and regulation of those commodities.
That you can ask for in finance.
Yeah, but that is
Well,
something. No, it's not
regulation
just-
is us.
not just in
Regulation
finance.
is us, but we are not gonna
It's
have
not
time.
just in
to do that.
finance,
Yeah.
it is regulation generally, and that's something that can be done
Right.
between JFR and the board, and also, Ledge Council, in fact, we're tasked with that.
And I would
So that we
argue,
get a picture of how these commodities are different in terms of the way they're
Right.
dealt with, both administratively, locally in terms of regulation and what cities and towns can do, and then also what practically the regulation is. And I think that would inform us.
in a way, we have to have common sense like we would regulating any industry. So take short-term rentals. We had a very long conversation in this committee about how short-term rentals are a huge problem in tourist areas, the ski areas, Burlington, et cetera. And it makes a lot of sense for Burlington, the ski areas, to regulate short-term rentals because they are squeezing the vacancy rate in very specific hotspots in the state. Does it make sense to have a statewide moratorium on short-term rentals? No, it does not. That's not at all right. No other state has a moratorium on short-term rentals because you probably need short-term rentals in the kingdom where they have very few hotels versus the Mad River Valley. So economic development has to take very seriously a statewide moratorium on any economic commodity.
Agreed, and we're gonna hear from Pepper in response.
Yeah.
But Tito, thank you very much.
Yeah, my
This was
pleasure.
helpful,
My pleasure.
very appreciative,
Thank you.
and we're gonna pivot to Josh.
I'm gonna keep it brief because I want everyone to have a chance to speak, and I haven't formally testified, but I have
You have
represented.
testified.
I have represented the
Introduce
peanut gallery
yourself
well,
and
so,
testified.
thanks.
Josh, welcome.
Joshua
It's nice
Decatur.
to have you in the witness chair.
Appreciate it, appreciate it. Let me just give a little bit of background, on myself and formally introduce myself. So born and raised in Vermont, Grand Isle County. Started growing weed there when I was 17, just like lots of people in Grand Isle County. Out in our backyard in the swamp.
You aware
you
of
know.
this?
It's a cultural trend. Oh, you'd be surprised, those Allberg boys are serious, but, anyway,
Was it illegal then?
no, hell no.
Okay.
But it was equitable in a weird way. And so, I went out to the West Coast after getting an economics degree from UVM, actually. And I ran a farm out there and I watched the transition happen from, illicit to, legal and recreational. And the writing was all over the wall, that everyone was gonna go out of business. Today, they're all out of business. There's no more craft market in California. There used to be $6 to $7 billion of cash coming back to Humboldt every single year. Roughly the geographical size of Vermont, roughly 600,000 person population. Now, there's not. The farm next to us was owned by Jerry Jones, actually the owner of the Cowboys, fun fact, and he was making that money too. So all kinds of people were involved. It was kind of an open, dirty secret back in the illicit days, that like it was illegal, but lots of people were engaged in that business.
Now the
Even-
main retailers in California look like Target.
Yeah,
Mad Men.
exactly. They lost a lot of culture, they lost a lot of quality because there are people in Vermont, across the country, who are more interested in having a highly profitable monopoly than they are in having a
Right.
diverse, successful, integrated, really vibrant economy that benefits all Vermonters. So all of you have a duty here to stand up for the normal, everyday people of Vermont and do what is best for them, not what is best for what will end up being 5 retailers who get
So
these event
remind us,
licenses. Which is,
when
yeah,
California legalized and when those farms.
that would have been like 2018 when I was out there. I
Yeah.
think 2020 it went full legal, but I transitioned that farm into being legal and recreational.
Right.
And then came back to Vermont because I'm a Vermonter. I was born here and I'm gonna die here. So, that's what it is.
Wait, you haven't lived out all your days yet, so that's not captured.
Well, knock on wood,
So remind us, as in your introduction of yourself, you're an indoor and outdoor.
We're an indoor-outdoor cultivator. We're also a manufacturer and we're also a retailer. Now, let me give you a
What
little,
tiers are you?
we're tier 2 mixed for cultivation, and then the other ones don't have tiers, they're just normal. For background, we started just intending to be a tier 2 grower. We grow very good weed. It's me, my brother, and my childhood best friend. We are professionals. We've been doing this for a long, long time. It's not by accident. This is our craft. We've dedicated ourselves to it. We aren't entitled to it. We work hard at it every single day. We sacrificed a lot. I slept in my car for 6 months. All of us drained our savings accounts, went into credit card debt, did everything possible to make this work. We built our grow, built fans around our flower, got a reputation in the market for having good product. That allowed us to proceed to apply for a retail license because of consumer demand, because Vermonters wanted it, to be able to open up a retail where they could buy directly from us instead of through an intermediary who at that time, all the retailers, our high quality product kind of ruined their sales strategy of telling people that low quality product was high quality product. And things kind of fell apart in dispensary. So we had to take our destiny into our own hands, which I think everyone should have the right to do at a certain level. So we
I
did.
have to go to natural
Good luck.
resources.
Good luck. We'll fill you in.
Thanks. And we did that because there was an avenue available to us. There were rules and regulations for it. We could get a retail permit. Those avenues are now gone because the retail licenses are no longer being handed out by the Cannabis Control Board. There is no more path of self-determination for a company. There is no more opportunity for organic growth or for responsible, skilled businesses to be able to reap the benefits of their hard work and their wise decisions and their experience.
So I'll ask you a question as
Yeah.
a retailer. How are you feeling about your neck of the woods in terms of a glut of retail?
I don't think we have a glut of retail operations. I think that
And where is your?
we're in
retail?
Burlington, right down the block from Tito. But I think that
Tito does feel there's a glut.
I understand that sentiment, but I think that we're under stress too. We're not doing well too. We're hand to mouth, like Theo said, no one's doing well. I think, and I can understand a reaction being, oh, we can't have any more stores, but I have an economics degree from Vermont and I understand macroeconomics and I know it's more complicated than that. And I think that at the end of the day, the more regulations that come into markets like this, and you see this in other industries, just create opportunities for corruption. They create opportunities that they devalue, they destroy the quality of products because you don't have any fair competition between people. People who have a lot of money end up doing quite well in a monopoly context, but the illicit market thrives because if I'm a small grower and I'm growing and I have no path of self-determinacy, I can't go get a retail license, I can't apply for an event license that I can host, there's no option for me. And I'm facing going out of business, not being able to feed people's families or selling cannabis for some cash on the side. All these people are going to sell cannabis for cash on the side. And the cannabis market year over year right now is down. It is down. And that is next year, it'll be down again. And I'll come back here and I'll tell you I was right because it's a trend and we're seeing an economic trend. And where's that cannabis going? It's being diverted. The market is shrinking. You can't get it to market. So this bill, as it sits now, we cannot support because it supports the illicit market, because nothing novel is being piloted. We threw 5 farmers markets at our dispensary with CCB approval. CCB agents came, inspected it, walked through it. We had a policy that we ran our dispensary as a mutual aid organization for after of sales to creators, after
so
taxes.
You ran a showcase.
Yeah, we
as
did.
a retail.
Yeah, we did. And we weren't greedy about it, and we did it to show that it was possible. We did it with CCB permission.
And
they came, they saw it, they okayed it, it worked, and I think so it's already kind of been piloted by us. We already did that. Again,
do you not see value in that being expanded around the state?
I see value in it being expanded around the state in the most equitable, fair, and accessible way because of all the reasons I just mentioned, because this is the Economic Development Committee and the cannabis economy is shrinking. The legal market is shrinking. The illicit market, we don't have numbers on, but going off of just feel and vibe, I can tell you that's doing
anecdotally,
great. Anecdotally, it's doing great.
You understand that growers who are not who are not having enough retailers purchasing their product or selling on the side?
Well, they're gonna have pressure to sell on the side. I don't know what's
Okay,
going
there's
on.
pressure, okay. I think
There's
that's fair
gonna be,
to
there's gonna be pressure on for them to
Okay.
sell other places, you know?
So what would make the showcase, what would make the expanded farmers market work for you?
Oh, one other thing. I also built track and trace software for the Agency of Agriculture in Vermont. We tracked and facilitated the entire hemp program. I also wrote and consulted on policy in 8 other states. So I'm very, very familiar with this. I've written a lot of language actually in bills like this. So I'm not just talking out of my butt.
You are a huge resource.
I'm a resource, and I'm here to help. I really care, and I can promise you, like I said last time I was here, if I'm sitting in this chair, I take the responsibility we have to our community really seriously. I will never push for things that are just good for me. Technically, stopping all licenses in Burlington would be good for me. I don't think that's fair.
So we're not talking about stopping things. I mean, I just
I
want
know,
to
but
back up.
I'm just
We're talking
contextualizing.
about pausing it.
I know,
To
but
reassess a market all of you agree is
But
blood.
when the account hits zero, it hits zero. So, you know, that doesn't, that same, you know? You know, again, and I want to stress, direct to consumer was not how the illicit market was. It's not how the illicit market is. Back in those days, growers were secretive, isolated, not participating as, you know, healthy community members the way we would like them to. It caused a lot of problems. It actually was and still is an extremely complex international market with tons of financing and tons of liquidity. What we're trying to build here in Vermont is something better than that. And right now we have the ingredients to do that. Right now we have people who drive 8 hours away to come to our dispensary to buy our product because they can't get any product of the similar quality in their home states. Right now we have actually one guy planned a trip from Switzerland who's going to New York, and he came back up just to get some of our hash because it was better than everything he could get in Switzerland, which is a hash culture going back thousands of years. So Vermont has this ability. And if this bill passes forward as it is, without some sort of equitable and accessible path to market for producers in the form of events, or even in the form of maintaining retail licenses being open or something, the market will collapse. And the economic development that's taken place, hundreds of millions of dollars of new money, tens of millions of new tax revenue, thousands of jobs supporting probably tens of thousands of families and individuals within families at this point, will lose that. And again, we hear that like the governor is going to veto it and all this stuff. I don't think that's true. If you look at his signing statement from Act 54, he didn't sign that cannabis bill because it didn't do enough for small farmers and didn't do enough for social equity. I think the governor understands the importance of these distributed small businesses around the state. And again, if he wants to be the one to veto that, and then all these companies go out of business, put it on him. Don't put it on this committee. Right now, it'll be your fault. You know, just for the record.
Randy, and then Tom, did you have a?
No. What is your understanding of the purpose of the moratorium?
My understanding of the purpose of a moratorium is to eliminate competition within the retail market to try to improve how certain businesses look on paper so that people can sell their companies and exit the market while they still can. And I don't think that's fair.
Okay. Now, is that going to match what we hear from the Cannabis Control Board as the purpose of the moratorium?
Probably not, but I'm speaking from an industry perspective who knows these people and understands
And the
these
second
businesses.
question is, there are some who claim that particular markets are saturated with retailers or overrun with retailers.
Yeah.
Would you think it might be helpful to have a moratorium in certain parts of the state that have an allegedly saturated market, but remain open for retail licenses elsewhere in the state?
Believe it or not, I still believe in some element of free market economics. Maybe not entirely, but
I
at
hope
least
you
a little
support
bit.
that fully as a graduate of UVM's
Yeah.
economic development. Economic department.
Well, it's, as you know, economic research is a lot more diverse today than, you know, University of Chicago, you know, invisible hand stuff. But in general, there are certain times where a level of competition is important for equity and fairness. And so on the basis of that, I cannot support that because there's no other industry where that's the case. And we just want to be treated like any other industry. And at the end of the day, some retail, like you need to be a value add to the industry if you're in it as a business. But right now, there's lots of retailers who are only in it because they're protected by the legislation and they're protected by the rules. That's the only reason they're here.
Okay, thank you.
And that's not right. That's not right.
And it's a pause. My understanding is it's a pause,
But
not
again,
a full-time moratorium.
a pause
For-
that
for a
ends
year.
businesses is a full-time moratorium for those businesses.
And so, Thomas, and then we're gonna shift
Would you not
Yeah.
agree that what you're really pushing back against are natural economic forces for highly regulated industries that benefit from economies of scale? Usually don't stay fragmented for too long because you do get a concentration of players because it takes a lot to suit these regulations.
Right.
Cannabis is not pharmaceuticals. Cannabis is an agricultural product that's grown as a plant. And when you say highly regulated, there's a very wide range of what highly regulated industries look like. We're imagining a future where cannabis is highly regulated, more like raw milk or more like alcohol. Not where it's highly regulated like defense contracting and pharmaceuticals. So in the context of being highly regulated like alcohol, there's nothing like these restrictions that exist in the alcohol market today. Now, some people will say, well, it took 60 years to do that and it took so long to get here and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's 2025. We can learn from the past. We don't need to go through another 60 years of nonsense. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. So Josh, you're gonna be welcome to add as we go, but we're gonna need to hear from Sarah
Yeah,
and
I want
Aaron,
other
and then
people
we're
to be
gonna
heard
shift.
from. Thanks,
to
and I
Peppery
believe
Day.
all of you got a lot of emails too, because this is politically popular. The people of
Yeah,
Vermont
yeah,
need a
no,
voice.
we
not-
are
Not
clear.
lobbyists and investors.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah,
This is Graham Minister for not, I just want to clarify something real quickly, because when James spoke before, he said the CCB was not legislatively given powers to geographically limit where retail setting is, and that's, actually last year they were given that exact power.
Yes.
So they have specific powers to limit geographical setting of retailers as it is, and that's why Jeff put out that language to say we don't need this in the bill, it already exists, they have it.
Hi, good morning.
So,
My name is Sarah Farnsworth, and I am a ninth generation Vermonter coming from Windsor County, but I've been living in Chittenden County for the last 30 or so years. I'm a single mom. I have two sons. One of them will be 20 this year. It's hard to believe that I'm that old, but
you're not that old,
here
my
I
dear.
am.
Take a look.
So, I've raised my son alone solely, labored and delivered that kid myself and raised him financially on my own as well, much thanks to some of the programs that are available to low-income Vermonters like myself. But I have primarily resided in low-income housing or homelessness a few times in raising my two boys. So there's a few things that I want to talk about today. One thing that's really pretty important to me is talking about the economic empowerment designation that is being used to kind of brag about how.
So, but as you introduce yourself, just tell us what's Full Circle Farm and how are you in this conversation?
So I'm a tier 3
Because you could be in a
cultivator.
number of our conversations, because we have a big jurisdiction in this.
Sure. I'm a tier 3 cultivator. In year 1 of the market, I was a tier 4 cultivator, which was pretty large for an outdoor cultivation business.
So you're an outdoor cultivator.
I am an outdoor
So that's the
cultivator.
hat you're wearing. Okay,
Yeah, I
good for us
don't
to
use
know.
electricity really, other than my drying and curing and storage process, which is pretty low. I like to think that I'm likely having a positive impact by not consuming electricity. I have a master's degree in sustainable innovation. I got my MBA from the University of Vermont in 2020. As a ninth generation Vermonter, as I had mentioned before with agrarian roots, I was a first generation college student and I have battling poverty essentially my entire life, generational poverty, and it stemmed from my elders who came here to settle and were farming in Vermont and have been doing so for a long time. And so I've kind of set on this quest to get out of poverty and to get my kids out. And when I was in grad school and studying for my MBA, I saw that there was going to be some policy changes that would allow me to start my own business. And after having successfully run other people's businesses for 20 plus years, I decided that it was my turn to put on my entrepreneurial hat and try to build that wealth I've been seeking. Well, I didn't have land. I pitched for land, I pitched for money, I pitched for anything I could get. Found some land partners, and 6 months in, that fell out, so I lost land in my very first year of business. Set out to pitch for more land and ended up finding a land lease from one of Chittenden County's largest landowners, who's also a quite controversial one. This past year, my rent just increased 50%.
So you lease land?
I lease land, and I now have a lease at a time, and it's likely going to be increasing 50% each year. So add on top of this that I've put in $45,000 worth of credit card debt to get this going. My business is not viably really able to pay me more than a livable wage. It really just is a drop in the bucket in raising 2 sons. I'm like kind of strapped and not really doing so great. I have multiple other jobs. I work as a bartender for weddings and special events. And I have another job as well that I use to support my family. Just still trying to make dreams come true and create a better life for my kids. I can tell you that currently I'm handling every aspect of my business, from sales to security, and I'm the grower as well. I kind of handle everything. I have a 100% woman-owned and operated business, and I'm really proud of that, that I employ a couple other women. One of them is another single mom, and really trying to elevate them by providing education as well as a meaningful career where they're able to like create some wealth for themselves. So I'm kind of putting other people ahead of myself, but I like to think about people and planet over prosperity. So that's kind of part of my mission. So I was really organized in the beginning. I got one of the first license types of that tier 4 cultivator. I was like first out to market, and I've done a really good job about building brand recognition and having my product recognized in the marketplace. But I am seeing that a lot of my fellow cultivators are really struggling because there's a bottleneck in terms of getting product to market. So a lot of retailers have done a great job of establishing relationships with a lot of these first to entry businesses that were first to market. And those folks really have an upper hand in what's happening here because they've already got the shelf space reserved. But for any new entry to market or any smaller cultivators that maybe don't have the marketing built up yet, those folks are struggling. And I anticipate, like after what I'm hearing today, I'm really sad to say, but I can guess that there's probably 200 people that are going to go out of business. They are waiting for a change so that they can sell their product. I saw one of my friends just this week throwing some flour into compost. It looked like a couple of pounds because it's okay. We'll build soil if we can't sell it. You know, what else are we going to do with this? There's just this really difficult space that cultivators and producers are in where we just do not have enough avenues to get our product to market. And so direct to consumer sales is vital for success. I am literally white knuckling it and holding on and waiting for some changes to happen to some of these rules. And I'm sort of in the back of my mind also trying to plan, like, how many more seasons can I endure this and bleed dry and have this struggle before I call it quits and go and use my degree and do something where I can make a 6-figure income for my family. But I believe in what I'm doing. I have a lot of passion for the plant. I've been doing this for a long time. It's been my medicine. I was a medical patient. But I don't really have a place to consume. I still live in federal housing, and so I can't consume at my home. So where do I consume? Well, I'm not going to disclose that today, but we need a place to do that. And also working at all of these events with weddings and catering and all these tourists coming to Vermont. I'd love to showcase all of Vermont's products, the cheese, the beer, the wine. There's so many things that we do so great here, including cannabis. And we need to be able to showcase that with events. And I'm not talking about events under a retailer umbrella because the retailers are already pretty set. It's the producers and the cultivators that are really struggling. Additionally, I'd like to see some sort of change to the programming so that the economic empowerment designation actually means something. Currently, it is just kind of like we did this many numbers of economic empowerment, but in my entire career in cannabis, and I was one of the early ones, I have never received any sort of benefit in any way of priority processing or any financial help at all for being a queer woman. So that's—
And just question, have you applied to LAOB, and have you applied for any of that?
So my understanding is that we would just receive priority processing.
Yeah, I know.
I think that we need to go further and have discounted fees and reduce some of the financial burden, because you are going to lose a lot of this. There's not a lot of women that are like really taking charge and doing this in Vermont. I think that we really need to work harder to empower them. And I do feel like if you really want to monopolize on the tourism that cannabis can bring here, which I really think that it's big, you've got to figure out public consumption, like, period, end of story. And sure, you mentioned getting a fine. Sure, I could get a fine for consuming cannabis at my home, but that also might mean that I lose my housing, and I'm not really sure.
You know, you're in a challenging spot.
Yeah, I'm in the challenging spot. So I have one harvest lot per year. I think that the fees are not in alignment with what is being produced, and so I'm supporting Mr. Rogers, Senator Rogers. I'm Lieutenant Governor Rogers.
John Rogers
excuse me.
is fine. We know who you're talking about.
I support his fee changes that he presented here today. I think that those are really important. I'm currently facing my renewal fees. I wish that this would get sorted out before I have to pay that big bad bill. I tried to scale down to a smaller tier because I recognize that there's too much material in the market and that I'm trying to be nimble and adjust my sales, to reduce my overhead.
And you
by
did,
producing
you
less.
moved from tier 4 to 2-3.
Well, I'm under renewal right now, and I was looking at going from a tier 3 to a tier 2 with the idea that maybe I'd move back up in the future when the market allows it, and it would be a way for me to reduce my costs. But there's no guarantee that I'm ever gonna be able to go back, so I'm holding on to that. Holding on to that tier 3 for right now. I'm gonna grow less plants. I'm not gonna use my full plant canopy, but I really am holding on to my dream. So I also would, the issue with the sole producer in Essex with the setback changes, that affects me. So not only am I on leased land that I'm at risk of losing year to year, but that setback issue really could have affected me negatively as well. I really would love to hear questions from you, or to be able to facilitate discourse, to be able to provide information about how I'm struggling as an entrepreneur, and fully available to the committee.
Right, and I think the fee conversation will be taken up in financing. You'll have an opportunity for that discussion. But thank you. Do you have any questions for Sarah? Yeah. Great, thank you very much. And
I do not support closing retail stores.
You don't support the pause?
There's a bottleneck, and there are a lot of areas within the state that do not have a store yet. And there are so many producers that need that avenue to be able to, so you've got to do something, because the market is collapsing, and these couple of really big indoor cultivators that are producing a lot of product are really forcing the race to the bottom.
Right.
We're seeing it happen. Prices are plummeting, and it is as a result of some producers producing too much and really dropping those prices to unsustainable levels. And I fear for the future.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We all appreciate you, A, making time, and B, your testimony, and make sure you sent it electronically.
I sure did. It's in your packet.
Yeah, we have it. Aaron, thank you.
Are we still taking a short break? Well,
We're gonna take a break after Aaron. Take a break as you need. Sorry, welcome, Aaron.
Welcome, thank you. My name is Erin Shaw. I am not from Vermont, if my accent comes out.
But we're glad you're here.
Thank you. I am from Alabama, and I own a retail store in Fairleigh. So I am really big on only supporting tier 1 and tier 2 growers, because they have given me the most support. I started undercapitalized. I needed terms, and it was all the small folks that were like, we got you. And because of that, my store is majority only tier 1 and tier 2 and small manufacturers, and I will keep it that way. I remember before I opened, I was confronted by someone who owns MSO. He gave me a proposal. And the proposal.
MSO, just for those of us who don't live in this world.
They own multiple state operations.
Multiple state operations, right.
So, and in that proposal, they wanted 25% of my gross monthly. They would be in charge of all of the retail operation, including who I can hire, the times. They wanted to be left unknown, but I would be.
They wanted to be undisclosed partner?
And the CCB allows it, because you can have up to 10% in multiple retails. So that's what they were doing. They were coming in. He now owns a retail store, and was like,
in Vermont.
In Vermont. and he also owns a tier 5 grow in Vermont. So it made it to where I would be making no money if I would have agreed. I do not come from money. I'm the first person to graduate with a master's degree. That's why I moved to Vermont. I went to Vermont Law School.
Thank you. Another economic engine in the state. It's the only reason I'm here too.
And I decided to stay. I'm a single mom. I barely take a salary from my dispensary. I still work full-time at BTPOC because the cost of living in Vermont is hard. And I do send my kid to a private school because he's Black. And so he has to go somewhere where there are other children who look like him and people who understand where he is coming from. My life has not been easy here. It has not been easy starting a dispensary. Everyone told me I needed at least $150,000. I raised $60,000. I worked 7 jobs last year to make my dreams come true. The name of the dispensary is after my Nana, who passed away from cancer. I come from a very poor place in Alabama where everyone has cancer. I have to get screened every year, and it's a barrier because like the social economic fund that is going away or could be, that will impact me. This year, I have to pay 25% of the license fee. I don't know where that money will come from because I have to also pay 20% of my sales to the state of Vermont, which is all of my profit. And I also come from a place where I am that people are poor. Like we're in an economy, people have no money. People scrape change. Like I take out of our tip jar just so people can buy product. It should never be that hard in a state where it is legal. I too can't smoke at my own property. It is in the lease. It is bold. No cannabis, but tobacco is allowed. So that is, you know, and they said on the premises, it's 17 acres. Yeah, so I also have to like go hiking just to smoke, which is, you know, it's kind of insane when it's winter time and no one wants to be outside in Vermont. At least I don't.
How do you feel, because we're running up against time, how are you feeling about the pause? Is Fairleigh glutted? Is Fairleigh glutted?
I mean, fairly small.
Right,
So,
we know that.
and it has to be 500 feet away from a school in the business district.
But you have a lot of other cannabis retailers in Fairleigh?
I'm the only one.
That's what I thought.
I am and pretty much
Where's the closest other?
Bradford, Vermont.
Distance?
It's about 12 to 15 minutes. And I look at his menu, so I'm not purchasing the same thing that he is purchasing because I feel like that is not right. I'm not in it for competition. People are gonna come because they want to come. And because I also just feel like I've created an environment for people to want to come to my dispensary. But it is a challenge. Like I don't agree with we should pause so other retailers couldn't come in. That's not fair. Vermont is very rural, it's small, so people are still driving 30 to 45 minutes to get to me when they could have one in their backyard. I also support direct sales because there was one tier 1 farmer who came to me with a box. He was riding around, going to every dispensary, and he was like, I need help. And I was like, I don't even have the money to help you, but let's do this. I didn't mark up his product. Like what he gave me, I like sold at that price just with taxes. So I didn't make any money to make sure he made money.
And did it sell?
And everything sold. And I think that that's what we should kind of come to. We should really be helping our small farmers. Vermont is all about small and local farmers, but they kind of forgot small local cannabis farmers. And it's like, it's medicine. It was my postpartum medicine. And like I said, I was in Alabama, so it was a little difficult. But to just see this market and see that like so many good growers that are small farmers are not in stores because they are a small farmer. And also because the THC percentages, which we have come to like, I don't know what we're doing, that everything has to be over 26%. And it's come to that where there could be a flower that's at 19% and no one's gonna purchase it from a small farmer because A, they don't know the person and it's testing too low. So I just think that we need to figure out how we can support small farmers. Like, I'm all for if they wanna come to my dispensary and I continue to say no markup on my end just to get your product out there. Just because the best product I've had has come from like the small folks that you don't see in other dispensaries.
Great, and that's why you do only tier 1 and tier 2
Pretty much.
growers, which is great. Terrific. Any questions for Aaron?
My apologies for missing the first part.
Aaron, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. What we're gonna do is take a break. We're gonna come back. If I apologize, but we're trying to squeeze a lot through the hose. We'll come back at 11 and then we are gonna start here from Pepper and Gabe and then
Sometimes you
we're,
plow through, so I wasn't sure.
well, I would suggest we all need to take stretch our legs. And let's come back at